Hello. My name is Daddy.
And I like to start serving you guys.
Hmm?
And I like to start serving you guys.
I would like to start very soon.
Please find your seats for Sabbath services.
Please register for Sabbath services.
Shabbat Shalom, everyone. My name is daughter of Yisrayl Abel Bathsheba Hawkins, and I want to serve you forever as the priest to start very soon. It's an honor and a privilege to introduce to you the sons and daughters now entering the sanctuary. I now turn it over to the great priest of the house of Yah.
Announcements. Attention everyone who lives or owns property in Callahan County. We are having a very important local election coming up in 2 months. Sheriff Terry Joy is retiring and we will be electing a new sheriff for Callahan County. The Texas Republican primary election is on 3/3/2020. This election will determine the new sheriff. Please make sure that you are registered to vote so that you can participate in this election and future elections to come. Each vote that we cast shows our local officials and neighbors that we're a part of this community and we are here to stay. Your vote helps protect Yahweh's work and supports the city of Yisrayl. If you need a voter registration form or have any questions, there will be a voter information table set up on the men's and women's sides of the sanctuary immediately after services. Sisters, if you are not already scheduled for a duty, please join us today in the sanctuary at 1:30 p.m. Enjoy righteous fellowship while you help in preparing Yahweh's message to be spread to the world. There will be a female counselors meeting today in the Kohana room at 3:30 p.m. Shalom, Great House of Yahweh. Today we'll begin our exciting new program at 4 p.m. Everyone is encouraged to attend. Remember, there are groups for children, youth, and adults. Please remember to bring a notebook, pen, or pencil. And children, we will see you all in the meeting room 4 at 4 p.m. sharp. Attention, sisters age 50 plus. Please come and join us Thursday evening, Isaiah 2, from 5 to 6 p.m. in Meeting Room 1 for Part 2 of our fermenting class, and learn about some old-timey refreshing drinks at the same time. Looking forward to seeing you there. Shalom, women ages 18 through 30-ish. We'll be meeting next week, Isaiah 8, in Meeting Room 1 at 3:30 p.m. The lost and found tables will be cleared off. Please take the time to check them today to make sure your missing items are still there. Check them today while your missing items are still there. Enjoy dinner today at the Lamplight Cafeteria. We will be serving oki deer, parsley, potatoes, and beans. The cafeteria will close at 3 p.m. sharp and will reopen Thursday morning at 7:30 a.m. The men's and women's concession stands will open at 3 p.m. and will stay open until all are served. Supper will be served in the concession area only starting 4:45 p.m. That's all the announcements I have, and I'll turn over to Sonny Israel for prayer.
Please raise your hands to Father Yah. Shalom, most righteous, holy Father Yah. This is Deacon Isayah, coming to my Father, Hawkins, finding through the body of priests, through Pastor Hawkins, and through Yeshua Messiah. I thank you for the Sabbath day. I thank you for allowing us to be here at your house. Please bless the lips of the speakers. Please release all the refugees and anyone who's being held captive at this time by the basic governmental system here or abroad. Please help us to be thankful for everything that we have. I thank you for the food, water, and air that you provide for us each day. Please help us to gain knowledge and understanding. Please help us to be a help and not a hindrance to our brother or ancestors on the Sabbath day. And unity with the body of priests, through Pastor Hawkins, through Yeshua Messiah, we ask and pray all these things. Hallelujah, I praise you.
Most holy and righteous Heavenly Father Yahweh, this is Kwan Shmuel Hawkins, along with this, your family, Father, begging permission to come before you as seat of the witness, Yisrayl, and 3, Yeshua the high priest over the house of Yahweh. Father, we thank you for the ability and the opportunity to burn this incense in your presence, Father. We know that it represents our prayers, the prayers of the saints. We thank you for your protection, and we thank you for this, your Sabbath day, Father, a day that we can put our own issues aside and consider your work, Father, and consider one another to make this day a delight for each other. We thank you, Father, for this, your family called by the name of Yahweh. We thank you for allowing us to be here. Father, there are some that are suffering physical maladies, emotional or mental issues, Father, and I do pray that each and every one of us, Father, would be empathetic, keep each other in our prayers to you, Father, and pray that each and every one of us would be healed in mind, body, and spirit. That Pastor would continue to be strengthened, strong, and courageous, and continue to teach us all of your ways, Father. And I do pray that we live our lives just as he's been teaching us to live them, because we know that's what brings life. I do thank you, Father, for your house, and thank you for those that are here and those that are scattered throughout the earth. And do ask that your mercy be upon us continually, and that we can all gather soon. I do love you, Father, and ask these things of you, thanking you for them in unity with the body of priests, the house of Yahweh, a seat of the witness Yisrayl, and 3, Yeshua the high priest. Hallelujah, Yahweh. Praise Yahweh.
If y'all stand, I'll turn the services over to the Queens of the House of Yahweh.
Shalom. Please take a few moments to listen to this brief message. It's so important for you. It's pretty obvious, even to the most optimistic and positively positive person there is, that something's going very wrong in the world. We're seeing the world in a place we have never in the history of mankind seen before. Because of course, prophecy is being fulfilled, sin is at its peak, and you are being given instructions from the Creator himself on how to make it through this time period, with him guiding your every move. I mean, talk about being blessed. But it takes work on your part. It is conditional. And remember this: blessed is he who believes without seeing. Remember Luke 24:25. O fools, and slow of heart to believe all that the prophets have spoken. The commanded feast of Passover is coming up this spring, depending, of course, on the sighting of the new moon. But the scheduled date is for Yeshua's memorial to start on 4/7/2020. And then the feast starts on 4/8/2020 and goes through 4/15/2020. You need to start planning now on being at this feast. The pastor has already said he believes the following Passover could be the feast where the prophesied burning in Revelation 18 takes place, and we are shielded from that if we keep his feasts. But it could also be this coming Passover. It could be Colossians 2:17. These feasts are a shadow from things to come. This is a warning. O fools and slow of heart to believe all that the prophets have spoken. Now, we need not to fall into the category of the fool. Yahweh is giving us time now to prepare. The warning has gone out. Read Psalm 91. Read that. He who dwells in the secret place of the Most High will abide under the shadow of the Almighty. There's that word shadow again. When we keep Yahweh's feasts, we are under his shadow of protection. Now, Yahweh's feast, not just any feast and not just at any place. No, we have very specific instructions. We have to first seek Yahweh's house, as Yeshua said in Matthew 6:33, but seek you first the kingdom of Yahweh and his righteousness, and all these things will be added to you. So this is conditional. If you do what is commanded for your own benefit and protection, then you have this blessing. Now back to Psalm 91 again in verse 9. Because you have made Yahweh your refuge, because you have made the Most High your house, the house of Yahweh, no evil will befall you, nor will any plague come near your dwelling. Now, you know that the house of Yahweh is the only ones willing to keep Yahweh's laws. Think about that. There is no other organization that keeps the whole law and properly. None. The house of Yahweh is the only prophesied place, and it's the only place where our protection is absolutely guaranteed. Now, Pope Benedict once said, the Lord seemed to be asleep. Well, it's because their lords have no power, and they know it. Yahweh is not a Lord, and Yahweh is not a God. They don't serve Yahweh, which is why they have no eternal blessings. Our Heavenly Father, whom we serve, he doesn't fall asleep on the job. He has never let us down, and he never will. We too need to not let him down. We need to be at his feast as he has told us. Believe without seeing, keep this upcoming Passover, and Yahweh will uphold his end of the deal. He will protect us, and he will see us through this time of trouble that has never been before, as Daniel 12:1 says. Yahweh keeps his promises. Get ready for Passover, whatever it takes to be there. Call 1-800-613-9494 or email us at info@yahweh.com.
Shabbat Shalom, everyone. Please be seated. Now I'm going to be continuing on with my last speaking subject, which was Hotbird 613. And if I could have my first two slides, please. This first slide is Hotbird 613, and this is the actual satellite coverage that Hotbird 613 covers. And this is the satellite that the Prophetic Word program was actually being broadcast on one of the channels. I want to clarify this. There was one channel that the House of Yahweh had on that satellite that broadcast the House of Yahweh 24/7. There's hundreds of channels on these satellites, but the House of Yahweh, that's when the House of Yahweh started broadcasting over there in the Middle East. Now, if I could have my second slide, this is the footprint of the old Roman Empire. And if you notice, Hotbird 613, the Prophetic Word program, covered the same footprint as the Holy Roman Empire. And it was at this time that the European Union and the Mediterranean Union were planning to join together to recreate that footprint. And the Vatican was at the behind the scenes working on that. Now, I want to read something this is from the Prophetic Word Program, Hotbird 613, Fulfilling Prophecy. And this is on the 7/2000 newsletter. The newsletters from 2006 to 2007, on the back of the newsletters, it explained this footprint. So if you have some of those older the newsletters, the House of Yahweh newsletters, look at them and read the information. And what it says is, the Prophetic Word program is now broadcasting on Hotbird 613 satellite. The broadcast footprint for this satellite is exactly the same as the old Roman Empire. Now, if I could have my third slide, please. The House of Yahweh is now fulfilling this part of prophecy in Matthew 24:14. And this message of the kingdom will be preached to all the world by the one who bears witness to all nations, and then the end will come. So this prophecy was fulfilled in 2005. We went over those dates, 2005, when the satellite was actually put on, was actually started to broadcast. Now, what I did was I had done some gematrias on the Hotbird 613, and one of them was, if I could have my next slide, please, Hotbird 613 satellite. And these are the three numbers that came up in the gematria from the internet. One was 1349. One was 1980. Now, 1980, that rings a bell. That comes from 1909. I will be getting into that a little bit later on. And the last number is 330, and that's the number we're going to focus on. Now, if you see, it says 330 is from an unused root, probably meaning to bind. To bind. You know, we're to bind the laws in our mind and on our hands. Remember the scriptures that Yahweh brings out. If you want to know more about this binding and the continuation of this, the next one is probably twisted yarn. What does twisted yarn bring to your remembrance? The seats. And please read Why the Holy Garments, and that will explain the importance of the seats on the corners of the tallits that are made from linen. That's what number 330 is referencing. Fine linen. We are instructed to wear, the overseer was instructed to create the fine linen garments, the holy garments for the women, the tallits and the kippahs for the men, so that we could come before Yahweh as he has commanded us. Now, I did a search on the Yisrayl Says program, and if you go to the fourth book of Yisrayl, and on number 14, verse 86, it's Revelation 19:8, and to them was granted that they should be arrayed in fine linen, clean and white. Deuteronomy 6:25 says it is your righteousness to keep the law. So not only when the satellite was put, when the program was put on the satellite to start broadcasting and fulfilling Matthew 24:14. It also is referencing and leading us to what we are doing right now, is being instructed by the overseer, and on, let me find it, the Sabbath reviews. It is Isaac, the 21st of Isaac. He goes into the importance of linen, the necessity of linen. Yeshua represents us through the linen frequency, like river of information about each person Yahweh has called to his work. The heavenly court trial has granted us the right to wear the white, bright linen, and the feasts are our protection. And with that, I'll turn it over to the next speaker.
Shabbat Shalom, everyone. You can be seated. My title today is This Present Prophesied Generation. Now, not long ago, Pastor said to take the latest book of Yisrayl and start studying from there. And that's what I did. And the first sermon, chapter 1, it was from Yeshua 3. And Yeshua is the 11th moon in Yahweh's ways. So that will be 11:3. That will be 113. So in 113 in Hebrew, it means to rule. And I thought that's a really great way to start the sermon there. So down in verse 3 of that chapter 1, it says, heaven and earth created to where mankind will have protection and guidance. And if I can have my slide. Heaven and earth created to where mankind will have protection and guidance. And you can see those three numbers there, 5267, 4140, and 690. And the first number in Hebrew, it means to take up. So for me to understand what take up means, I went to the synonyms of the word take up, which was to become involved in, become interested in, engage in, participate in, take part in, practice, and follow. And all that relates to us here in the house of Yahweh, to take part in the work of Yahweh, to participate in the work of Yahweh, so that we can become like Yahweh, as he commands us to be. In the MacmillanDictionary.com, the word take up something, it means to accept an offer or a challenge. Now, Yahweh is offering us a position in his kingdom, and to become sons and daughters, to take the authority of reigning over his creation. Do you accept that offer? Praise Yahweh. But with that offer, it comes a challenge. We have to be tested and tried and proven to see if we are fit to enter into the kingdom. In the 18th book of Israel, the latest one, in the dedication, Pastor, it's written, it is not an easy task to refuse evil and to choose righteousness, but it's not little job that Yahweh is proving us for either. The second number, 4140, in the Hebrew, it means janitor. And one of the definition is one who produces or creates. And we know Yahweh is our creator, and he's the one who allowed us to be begotten by our parents so that we'll be here to learn his ways in the house of Yahweh. But it's not just our parents who begot us. In 1 Corinthians 4:14 and 15, it shows us that we can be begotten through the message. And in these last days, we are here because Yisrayl Hawkins has begotten us through the message. Praise Yahweh. And the last number, 690, in Hebrew it means lion. And it made me think of Yada, one of the 12 tribes. And I put in the Ametria, Yada, the present Vatican, symbolized by a lion. Yeah, Yada, the present Vatican, symbolized by a lion. And the first number, which I'm going to deal with, 3401, it means an adversary in Hebrew, and in Greek, it means to mimic. If you read the book, The Lost Faith of the Apostles, page 5 and 6, it talks about how Satan, through the counterfeit religions, has caused people to be deceived. And he even makes the religious counterfeit to look so righteous on the surface, genuine, and that's why people fall into it. And it's because she also knows the plan of Yahweh and the prophecies that she can skillfully do this and cause the deception. But what I'd like you to really notice in page 6, it says that in this very day we have many different religions that have partially come out from this confusion, but for one reason or another, they cannot and will not come to the complete truth. As people become more knowledgeable, Satan changes religions to start new ones. Some of these religions are so close to the complete truth that it is hard for one who is unwise in the scripture to tell the difference. In fact, some of Satan's religious teachings come so close to the truth that it will be possible for her to deceive all but the very elect. And we know she cannot deceive the overseer. And in Revelation 12:9, it talks about the whole world being deceived. In Revelation 14:9, it shows us that this world, they worship gods, and it's full of God worshippers. But in Micaiah 4:1-3, it shows that in these last days, Yahweh will establish his house and his ways will be taught throughout all the world. So I encourage you to study from the books of Israel, for you will understand the scriptures better. And I'll turn to the next speaker.
Shalom, everyone. Please be seated. I just want to say it's so amazing to see how in unity all the speakers are. Because if you've listened to the very first speaker, I was talking about getting ready to come to Passover. That's kind of where I'm going to pick up on. So this prophesied protected place. We have a gematria here. Can we please have that? This prophesied protected place. And you see the numbers 314, 1884, and 1074. We all know 1074 is one of Pastor's tag numbers. We're going to go through those numbers right quick. The 314, it has a very great meaning. It says last, western, later, future, and end. We know those words all point to Yahweh's last day's prophesied work, the western lamp on the lampstand. In the Greek, it means to know again or to read, like in read, or like study the book of Yahweh. Okay, Hebrew 1884 means skilled in the law, a judge or a counselor. And in the Greek, 1884 means to avail for help and to relieve. Now, when you put those two together, it brings to mind Zechariah 6:13, where it talks about the council of peace will be between Yisrayl Hawkins, Yisrayl Hawkins, who is a chosen branch, and Yeshua, our great high priest, who will help the people be relieved from the burden of sins that they have experienced. Okay, so that's all in this gematria of this prophesied protected place. And we all know that this place is the house of Yahweh in the last days. But the fact that Yahweh has a protected place in the last days, it's not going to help us unless we come here. And I know you noticed that from the very first message that was brought out today. It won't help us unless we come to this place. And Yahweh will make a way of escape for his people to come to this place. And that's a fact. It is a fact because there's several scriptures that back that up. We have Jeremiah 23:1-8, where it talks about Yahweh's people will dwell in safety here at the protected place at Abel. We have Malachi 4:1-6, where it says, "For you who reverence my name, the light of righteousness will arise with healing in its wings." Matthew 24:21-22, where Yeshua said, "The days will be shortened for our sake." Okay? So Yeshua Messiah said to seek first the kingdom of Yahweh. He said, seek it first. And a little bit of background on why he said to seek it first. Our overseer has explained all this already, because it was rejected. And in Genesis 3, remember, the offer was withdrawn. The offer of salvation was withdrawn. In the days of the 12 tribes of Israel, they rejected Yahweh's kingdom as well. Remember in Exodus 19, Yahweh had made a promise. He said, if you will obey my laws and my statutes and my commandments, I'll make you a kingdom of priests. But they didn't hold up their end of the promise. They didn't want it. it never came to pass. Like in Acts 7, it shows they rejected Moshe, the one Yahweh had sent. They chose evil as gods, as in Genesis 3:5, and that all fulfilled a prophecy in Genesis 49 about the 12 tribes. All right, so Yahshua, he came riding 2 donkeys. That's shown in verses 10 and 11 of Genesis 49, which shows the sign of him taking over the scepter, but he doesn't take it over by himself. That's another thing we have to understand. Yahweh's house has to be established in the last days. And we have Micaiah 4:1-3, Isaiah 2:2, and Matthew 6:33. That's why Yahshua said to seek it first. He was speaking it to his disciples. Remember, everything they wrote down was our foundation. So that applied to us. Seek first the kingdom of Yahweh that would be established in the last days. And then seek first the kingdom of Yahweh and his righteousness, and the protection will be added to you. You get that? So the protection of Yahweh will be added to us at the place that we are blessed from, the house of Yahweh at Abel. We have Psalm 118:26. Yahshua quoted that in Matthew 23:39. He said, you're not going to see salvation until you say, blessed is he who comes in the name of Yahweh. Pastor wrote an article called Protection from World War III, shown in prophecy, and he made a great point in there that's saying, 2 Timothy 2:19, Yahweh knows those who are his. You know, he's going to protect his people, but his people depart from iniquity. That's the point he was making. He said, we don't want to get ourselves cut off. He said, compare that scripture in 2 Timothy 2:19 with Isaiah 59:1-2, where sin cuts us off from Yahweh. And compare that with the warning Yahweh gave in 1 Yochanan 3:7, let no man deceive you. 1 Corinthians 6:9-10, the unrighteous will not inherit the kingdom of Yahweh. Do not deceive yourselves. So this is all part of the protection that Yahweh is going to give us at his house. We have one last gematria here. We can show that. It's special protection from Yahweh. This actually came from Pastor's sermon the last time he spoke, and he was talking about the 1,000 years it will take to clean up the earth. And we don't have time to get into those numbers right now, but you can keep that in mind. Special protection from Yahweh, and you see there 322, one of Pastor's tag numbers. And with this, if y'all please stand, I'm going to turn it over to the next speaker.
Shabbat Shalom, great saints of Yahweh. Please be seated. As you can see, it's all about the Feast of Passover 2020. So the title of my speech is Preparing for Passover 2020. And I have a few points that I want to bring out. So first is how to be saved by Yeshua Messiah's life. Because we know that through the blood of Yeshua, his blood paid for our remission of sins and reconciles us back to Yahweh. But his life is what saves us. So what exactly does that mean? So I would like to turn over to Ephesians 4:24 real quick. I gotta catch my breath. Okay. Ephesians 4:23, and be renewed in the spirit of your mind. Now notice, and be renewed in the spirit of your mind, and that you put on the new man, which is being created according to Yahweh in righteousness and true holiness. Now, those who walk as Yahshua walked. Okay. Therefore, we are buried with him by baptism into death, in order just as Messiah was raised from the dead through the plan of the Father, we also will walk in newness of life. So we have to walk as Yeshua walked in order to be saved. We have to put on the life of Yeshua in order to be saved by Yeshua's life. Do you know what I'm getting at? Because even though his blood paid for our sins and reconciles us back to Yahweh, we have to be as Yeshua, walk as Yeshua walked in the spirit and not according to the flesh, in the spirit, which is the laws of Yahweh. Like Yochanan 6:63, the laws of Yahweh are spirit and they are life everlasting, right? So in Romans 10:4, it says, and if Messiah is in you, your body is dead because of sin, but the spirit is alive because of righteousness. And if the spirit of him who raised Yeshua from the dead is living in you, he who raised Yeshua from the dead will also give life to your mortal bodies in his spirit, which lives in you. So this had me thinking, because we're habitual creatures, right? How our mind works is we have connections in our mind, and through these connections, we have habits. So every day you wake up and you're already in a routine. So in order to put on like Yeshua and walk as Yeshua walked, we have to create that new habit. So how do we do that exactly? It's like if you picture walking in a forest and there's already a trail that's been laid out, it's already been trodden down. And when we form a new habit, we're walking in a new way. So we literally have to go through all the thorns and keep treading a new path. And that's the same within our minds. To form these new connections, like that saying goes, if you don't use it, you lose it, right? So when we continue to practice, practice makes progress. When we continue to practice the way Yeshua walked, then we are being formed and walking according as Yeshua walked. In that way, we are being saved by Yeshua's life. Do you understand what I'm getting at? Shake your head. Praise Yahweh. So I'd like to show this video in just a moment, and it's our brain, because through this new rewiring of our mind, being renewed in our mind, like Ephesians 4:24 says, it says, be renewed in spirit in your mind, putting on the new man or woman, being created according to Yahweh in righteousness and holiness. And the laws of Yahweh are that spirit that gives life. So if you could please show the clip, and if you notice the wirings of our mind. When we create new habits, we fire off new wirings. But if we don't continue on that, creating a new habit, it doesn't stick. That's why it's so hard to get rid of a habit. But if we continue and put forth diligent effort into laying out that same path, then it gets stronger and stronger, being renewed in the spirit in our mind. Yahweh bless y'all. If you could all please stand, I'll turn it over to the next speaker.
Extra, extra, read all about it. Please be seated. Okay, no, don't just read it. Study this and you will know what Gematria is. Okay, so I'm going to put up this first Gematria after this one. Oh, it says here the Gematria is the hidden code or numbering system that Yahweh put in the Hebrew language. And he gave it to Abraham for his last day's seed, us, in the Garden of Genes. Praise Yahweh. Now let's look at the next Gematria quickly, and it says more than 1 million. And I have 3 numbers up there, and I suppose you're wondering what this is all about. So let's just put up the next slide. You see that? Over 1.2 million views on Sabbath services last week. And that was updated this morning at 8:14. So I went to the Hebrew and I looked at the number 814. Not quite yet. The 814, and it means a gift. And that brought me to Numbers 18:16. I myself have chosen your brothers, the Levites, as a gift to you, given by Yahweh. Israel is a gift to us. And I just want to go over Isaiah 59, where it says, where Israel says, he says, then Israel said, He says, I have labored in vain. I have spent my strength for nothing. And Israel, we just want to say that no, you have not spent your strength for nothing, and your labor is not in vain. So look what Yahweh has accomplished through the hands of the great overseer. Now let's go back to more than 1 million. You see those numbers there? That number 493. Okay, let's just go on. It says here, we see that the 828 there means a worshiper of Yahweh. It means to take oneself, to prefer, to choose. In the Greek, it's number 142, to raise up, to expiate sin. Every branch that bears fruit, it will be purged, and he will bring forth more fruit. Look how much fruit the overseer has brought forth. And who did Yahweh choose? Isaiah 44:1 says, Yet now hear, O Jacob, my servant, and Israel, whom I have chosen. He is the chosen one in these last days. And who did Yahweh raise up? Deuteronomy 18:18 tells us, I will raise up for them a prophet like you from among their brothers, and I will put my words in his mouth, and he will tell them everything I command him. Deuteronomy 18:18 goes to Acts 3:22, which says, For Moshe truly said to the fathers, Yahweh your father will raise up for you like a prophet like me from your brothers, and him you will hear in all things, and whatever Israel says, we will do. Now in Numbers 3:22, the number 322 from Acts 3:22, as we all know, is a tag number from Pastor's vehicle. This identifies him as the one that Yahweh is talking about here, the chosen one. So the other day, I was busy doing my own business when the phone rang, and it was Pastor, and he was like so excited. And he said, Judge Rebecca just called, and we topped 1 million. 1 million last week. That was on the pagan Christmas day. He said, check it out and see what the matriarch says. He said she called at 7:05. So I hung up the phone. I looked at my clock, and it was 6:44, and I'm thinking, wow, I must have some of my powers. I must be like the overseer, because it's before that time, and he's already telling me. And then I realized they're an hour ahead of us. So one day we'll get our powers. Just be righteous, keep righteous. And so then that's where he said, check that out. So at Abel, the time was 6:05. So can we put that Yemetri up? 6:05 p.m.? p.m. Look at who comes up there. Overseer's birth date, 8/28. Praise Yahweh. See, this is all about the witness bringing forth the work of Yahweh in these last days. And that number 1259 means hail, and it goes to 68 from the root of 1129 through the meaning of to build, a stone, a plummet, to repair, to begin to obtain children, building one's house, to establish a house that the overseer has done. And the holy prophet Isaiah, once again, with the witness of the holy prophet Micaiah, shows where and what house is being spoken of. Isaiah 2:2, it will come to pass in the last days that the mountain, the promotion of the house of Yahweh, will be established in the chief of the nations and will be raised above all congregations, and all nations will eventually flow here. Okay, so all this is being done. Boy, this rain reminds me of Deuteronomy 3:32, verse 2, Pastor's tag number again, where it says, let your words drop like rains upon the new grass. That grass here is you, us, the over millions that are coming to Yahweh's house to hear the great words of Yahweh, the words of life. And Pastor, through his holy, pure word, restores us back to Yahweh. And the effect on the believers is that the teachings are changing our hearts to Yahweh. And now let's go to the holy prophet Isaiah once again shows who will set things in order in these last days. Isaiah 44 verse 7 says, "And who, as I will foretell and set it in order for me, since I appointed the ancient people, and the things which are coming, let them foretell them." And the overseer is the one that is foretelling them. Now, I have more on this, sort of out of time, but it tells you that when you add those three numbers together, you get 2225. That means a rising light. And we know that the laws of Yahweh are the light that is rising, given from the overseer, coming down from heaven to feed Yahweh's people. At this time, let us all give praise and honor and glory to great Father Yahweh. Remember, we are in the last generation, and Yahweh is working a great work in these last days. Let us all rise.
Shalom. Please be seated. I know there's at least 20 people sitting here right now going, "Did I shut my windows?" So what do you think? Do you think Yahweh saw that new moon film last night? And this life-giving water raining down upon the house of Yahweh right now? The title of my speech today is An Opportunity of a Lifetime. An opportunity of a lifetime. And I'd like to start by showing a picture of a young girl that's going to come on the screen. It's a young girl. Do you see her there? This is Greta Thunberg, and she's just been named the Person of the Year by Time magazine. Now, she's also been voted as one of the world's 100 most influential people. She's 16 years old. That's quite impressive for a 16-year-old, right? Okay, but what I want to talk to you about today is the great work of Yahweh and the great blessing that we have to be a part of a work that is going to take us far beyond Time magazine, far beyond being one of the most 100 most influential people in the world. I'd like to show you Luke 13, verses 18 and 19. Luke 13, verses 18 and 19. And it says, "Then he said, 'What is the kingdom of Yahweh like? To what should I compare it? It is like the grain of a mustard seed, which a man took and planted in his garden, and it grew and became a great tree, and the birds of the air nested in its branches.'" Yes, this work of Yahweh started very, very small. But right now, how many million people? How many million? Let's take a look at this. Let's take a look at this. Over 1.2 million, you'll see it on your screen. Do you see where it says people reached? It says 3,015,644. That's the potential, right there circled in red, of people that could have potentially fell on this sermon. The comments, 1.3 thousand comments on that sermon. Do you remember when we didn't even have that many views? And now we've got that many comments? Okay, what I want to talk to you today about is this exciting work and what a blessing it is to be a part of this work. And to the young people, you saw Greta up there at 16 years old? Well, you know what she does? She goes around talking about global warming. You talk about things, young people, and you have the potential to talk about things that make the universe run. Why mankind is the way that they are, why we were created the way that we are. We know so many things because of our great teacher. And I'm telling you, young people, you can far outgo any scientist, any Greta, anybody in this whole universe. You are awesome. Why? Why are you awesome? It's not because of anything we did on our own. It's because we have a great teacher that Yahweh chose in these last days who tirelessly teaches us Yahweh's way. Hope you can hear me over the rain. I want to tell you about Yosef. Yosef at 17 years old was sold by his brothers, and he went and he was put over a kingdom. Do you remember Yosef? 17 years old. Yeshua died when he was 33 years old. All that work that he did before that, he did when he was young people. He did it when he was young. What about Daniel and his friends? Do you know how young they were? They were very young boys when they were taken into captivity. Very young. The potential that the young people in the house of Yahweh have, sometimes I would that I was young again. But then, it just doesn't occur. Okay, so I want to read to you Daniel 12, verse 3. Daniel 12, verse 3. And I want to really encourage the young people. It says, "And those who are wise will shine as the brightness of the heavens. And those who turn many to righteousness will become teachers, will shine as the stars forever and ever." When the missionary team goes out and they put the youngest ones up there, Pastor has showed us that everyone just stops. They stop what they're doing and they listen to these young people because they're amazed at the wisdom, knowledge, and understanding that they have. With what we've learned from Pastor, I'm telling you, we could put everyone to shame in the world. I want to read to you from the 5th book of Israel. This is the 5th book of Israel, chapter 2, verse 106. And Pastor is upholding the young people, and he's saying, "Speaking of that, I don't know if any of you noticed the brilliance of the children in the house of Yahweh. I see it in the children now. They are capable of learning very rapidly. I've seen a 2-year-old child who has the ability, if you hold up a letter in the alphabet, they can tell you what it is. A 1 or 2-year-old child can do that. I see young people who have almost the whole book of Yahweh memorized. You can read a scripture verse and they can tell you where it is. Or you can tell them a verse and they'll quote it for you. Their minds have grown here in the house of Yahweh." Right. Now, in 2005, were you one of the children that Pastor was talking about? What have you done with that great seed that our overseer planted in you? Have you grown more, or have you allowed it to die out? What have you done? You were one of those people he was talking about in 2005. I'd like to show you a Gematria. I put in young wise. Young wise. 828. The young wise people in the house of Yahweh are tied to our overseer, 828, which is the birth date of our great overseer, who always promotes and encourages the young people in Yahweh's house. Does he not? Young people, your overseer loves you. He loves us old people too, okay? This is not about us. It's not about us today. But there's going to be a new class that we're getting ready to start, where the overseer is going to have us teach you young people how to use your Strong's Concordances, how to use your Brown Driver and Briggs, how to look up the Gematria. Please get involved in this class. We're going to have more information coming on this. I'd like to read Psalm 119, verse 9. How can a young man cleanse his way? That's a question. Psalm 119, verse 9. The answer is in the next sentence. 119, verse 9. By taking heed according to your law, Yahweh. So he asks the question, how can a young person cleanse their way? By taking heed according to your law, through our pastor and overseer. I want to read a quote. And this quote, and they're going to put it on the screen for you. It says, "Your life is a result of your choices." Young people, old people, all people, if you don't like your life, it's time to make some better choices. Okay? Don't waste a minute of your life. This is truly an opportunity of a lifetime to be in this house in these last days. And to hear more, we're going to turn it over to our great priest. So, young people, your next lesson is coming right now. Please stand.
And we've all made the right choice to be here, right? Praise Yahweh. At this time, we get to hear from Great Deacon Michael Austin.
Shabbat Shalom, great saints of Yahweh. Please be seated. We're going to move quickly. I have 2 code searches to cover. The voice of Yahweh in these last days is Yisrayl Hawkins, the great priesthood, the priests and priestesses, all those who stand with Yisrayl Hawkins and teach the ways of Yahweh, the voice of Yahweh in these last days. That is the title of my first code search. I was going to do one on the Gematria, but these two came up at the last minute, and they're very important, so we switched. So this one's called The Voice of Yahweh. And if you right there, branches. Now it gets really kind of neat. Walnut Creek. Walnut Creek is where Pastor did a lot of his studying in the early days, training to become Yahweh's voice for these last days. Over here, crossing JG, connected to Buffalo Bill and JG, is Witnesses. And last, we have Homestead in 1980, where the dedication took place at the Homestead. Remember, JG, or Jacob Hawkins, came down to dedicate the house of Yahweh, and they had services at the Homestead. Now, let's get into this next one. Pastor Yisrayl called me yesterday, and he said we had topped 1 million viewers. Over 1 million people had tuned into Facebook Live. They had joined us for Sabbath services. So I'm like, okay, well, let me see. And this came together even as late as last night. I was finishing it. So let's get right into it. This, I'm going to have to try and squeeze it all in. Can you see all of it? Okay, all right. This one is amazing. Right here we have H-O-Y, Hey Wah Yod, H-O-Y, Facebook Live. All right? Now I'm just going to read them in order, because that's the way they would come up in the search. Over 1 million joined or linked for Sabbath on Samuel 24. Over 1 million joined or linked for Sabbath, Samuel 24. That was last week. So Yahweh had it in the code showing that over 1 million people were going to tune in. And remember, last week was the anniversary of the dedication of the house of Yahweh in 1980. Now I looked last night, and this date kept passing by, and I wasn't paying attention. And last night I discovered that I had to pen it in 1980. 1980 was in there. And I was like, well, I can't believe it. So Samuel 24, and then 1980 was the dedication. Now, I called Pastor Yisrayl yesterday, and I said, this particular person is the one who deals with the Facebook, right, with the numbers. He goes, oh yeah, she was the one that called me and told me that we're going to top 1 million, we're going to top 1 million. And he said as they were talking, it went over 1 million. So I looked, and it's a specific queen, a great righteous holy woman of new in the house of Yahweh, and it crosses Samuel 24, the day she was looking, Rebecca. Now, just so Yahweh made certain it wasn't just any Rebecca. Okay, are you ready for this? Judge Rebecca. Praise Yahweh. Pastor hoot and hollered and was just like praising Yahweh. It was so wonderful to see Yahweh honoring the people that do the work. And now I tell you, I've seen hundreds of names of the people of Yahweh in the codes. We're all in there. The whole history of the house of Yahweh, it's been said, is in the book of Deuteronomy in chapter 32, the Song of Moshe. Now, over 100 million. Over 100 million. I mean, isn't that incredible? Over 100 million, and it's just going to go up from there. So what I think we should do is pray and ask Father Yahweh for 100 million by Passover. Okay? Maybe 500 million by Pentecost. 1 billion by Tabernacles. And 2 billion by the next Passover. Okay? Yeah, I can see Pope Francis's face when we top 100 million. He's going to be like, what? What? He'll have trouble forming his words after that, huh? So that's all I have for today. Yahweh bless you with a wonderful Sabbath. Praise Yahweh for you. At this time, I have the great honor to turn over to a great priest in the house of Yahweh, the great Kohan Benjamin Krause Hawkins.
Shabbat Shalom. Yahweh's peace be with us all, and everyone abroad watching. You can be seated. I'll tell you, Okay, let's go ahead and put up the title slide. This will be part 8 of this series, The Architects of Deception, the Four Horns Cut Off. Can I have the next slide? Now, you've all been down here at Kane City, right? Across from Peaceful Scene. And you've all read everything you see, know, you've studied everything you read. Okay? When you put that in your matria, notice it's 5172, and it means observe signs. Diligently observe. Wow, what a coincidence, right? It also has to do with, remember, that's the same number that talks about the divining serpent, which is all displayed down there for you to go view. And no, you're not observing signs. You're not being a witch by going down there and observing those signs. Yahweh's just showing you need to be down there studying them. Can I have my next slide? Now, I left off last week talking about the Rothschilds and the Vatican. And this week, we're going to get a little bit more into it about their Ponzi and pyramid scheme. Notice the numbers all match. 1428, 1429, 1428, 1429. Wasn't that an amazing coincidence? And that 1428 and 1429 both mean bank. Bank. Or remember the bank, the banks, the banksters. Now this Charles Ponzi, I don't know if you all know what a pyramid or a Ponzi scheme is, but it's basically like this. You try to fool investors into giving you some money. You don't have anything to give them back, but you're hoping you can get all kinds of investors to buy into your scheme, and that they're not all going to make a rush on the bank all of a sudden to get their money that you don't have. And this whole system that Satan has set up, and that's why you see that pyramid, it is a pyramid scheme. There's nothing for her to give you. There's no eternal life she can give you. There's nothing that she can offer, but she's hoping no one will find out before she destroys or tries to destroy the heavens that govern the earth and the earth itself. Now, this man, Charles Ponzi, by the way, he was deported after his prison sentence in 1934 back to Italy. His prison number here, his mugshot is 5247, which is the word Nimrah, meaning Nimrod. And it's Strong's Greek 5247 means a projection or horn. Okay, now, remember last week we went over the 1429, 1428. When we added it all up, it came to smite, hammer, strike down, trample, stamp, conquer. And 3095 in the Greek was about magical arts and sorceries. A magician, remember the Rab Mag on the 7 hills, the chief Magian, the official of the Babylonian king, the elder or master, to be or become many or much. Keep those words in your mind. Let's have the next slide. Here's their Ponzi pyramid here. Okay, and you'll notice you get these numbers. The first one, 199, means been greedy. Lusts after, craves, greatly desires, wish for, covet. Greek 199, a band, a bond, a chain, or a string. Remember this band, this bond of, they're all bound in the circumstances, these four horns, in the circumstances surrounding the great river Euphrates. And we'll get into that as we go on. It's from 1210, and it means to tie, to bind, to compel, to put under obligation. That's what banks do as well, don't they? Put you under obligation, under great stress and debt, if you allow them. Strong's Hebrew 1194, the second number, is the house of the habitation of Baal. And then 1356 is the third number, and it means fallen from Zeus, fell from Jupiter, of the image which fell from Jupiter. Can I have my next slide? Add all those numbers up. You get 2749, and it means magician or magicians. From 2748, an engraver, writer, one possessed of occult knowledge, always applied to Egyptian magicians. The magician, diviner, astrologer, horoscopist, hidden, a teller of hidden things, magicians of Babylon. From 2747, now remember this number, graving tool with which Aaron fashioned the molten calf. Okay, remember the molten calf, which we'll learn about here in a moment. Can I have my next slide? Put all of those meanings in that I just gave you, and you get 5905, which means Shemesh, which means city of the sun, or the city of the sun god. 3543, the second number, means darken, fail, faint, to be or grow dim, to be weak or grow dull. 3543 in the Greek means to practice, to assume a prevailing custom, a law or practice. From 3551, that which is assigned, a custom, any system of religious thinking or theology of the Christian religion. Okay, keep these meanings in your mind. The third number, 3586, means deceptive, false, faithless, lying. From 3584, to disappoint, to deceive, to fail, to grow lean, cringe, deception, pretend, obedience, deal falsely, be found liars, submit selves. 3586 in the Hebrew, in the Greek, I'm sorry, that should be Greek. It means a cross, a piece of wood, a staff, the trunk of a tree used to support the crossbar of a cross in crucifixion. Hopefully by now we all know that the Messiah was not crucified. If he was, he would have been nailed like this, like on a cross. But he was put on an upright pole or a stake. But this is the cross of deception here in this Christian religion. When you add up all the numbers, you get 1334, and it means to cut off, to chop up, divide. And that's what you're going to see is going to take place with this four horns, which we're going to see more about here. Can I have my next slide? This Shemesh, let's talk a little bit more about that. Put in Shemesh in Gematria. Shemesh is city of the sun god. The first number, 104, means a missive delivered by a state courier or a letter. Strong's Greek 624, the second number, means Apollonia, Apollo, the sun god. To destroy utterly, to mar, perish, lose, cutting off entirely, it means. That third number, 325, is, remember the Council of Nicaea in 325, which convened on the summer solstice because of Constantine's sun worship on 21st June 325 AY. Also coincidentally, the area code of Abilene, Texas, the buckle of the Bible Belt, is also 325. Now you add up all those numbers and you get 1053, and it means Beth Shemesh, house of the sun. Wow, what a coincidence, right? And notice there, Pope Francis, his flag off to the right there, Argentine flag with the sun, the god Inti. By the way, type in the god Inti, you get 666. Can I have my next slide? So let's talk about the four horns cut off here. You see down here at the peaceful scene, y'all remember that time that sword fell off the top of that missile? We're going to talk about that in a minute. It was cut off. It was chopped off. Hope you remember that. 4 years ago. 4 years ago, last Sabbath. Y'all remember that, right? 4 years ago. I think a deacon got up here last week and talked about that number 4, didn't he? So, four horns cut off, 238 means to give ear, to listen, to perceive by ear, pay attention. You know, like you would do if you're watching that Facebook page, watching services. From 241, it means broadness, advertise, audience, hearing, revealed, revelation. Remember, we're all part of these four horns being cut off by our teaching, the teaching that comes from the house of Yahweh. The second number, 1428, there it is again. It's the word bank, and it means meaning to cut off, a border of a river as cut into by a stream. And then the third number, 1082, means to recover strength, to break off or loose. Remember those four horn, that altar down there at the Cane City with the horns, remember, broke off. Okay, and you add all those up and you get 2748, and it means, again, it goes back to that 2747, the graving tool with which Aaron fashioned the molten calf. Keep that in your mind, because again, it's coincidentally, it just came up again. 2748 in the Greek is from 6939, and it means dusky, to be dark, to grow black, grow dark, to mourn, mourning, to be dark, be very black. And that's what's going to take place. Remember, their divining is turned dark to darkness, but this earth is going to turn to darkness as well after these nuclear wars and when the four horns are cut off. Can I have my next slide? Let's hear what Pastor says about these four horns. This is from the 16th book, chapter 41, verse 41. He says, look at verse 40, saying to Aaron, make us gods. Notice, by the way, saying to Aaron, make us gods, 1356 fell from Jupiter. Make us gods, make us gods, make us into gods. That's what they're still doing today. They're making themselves gods to rise up and play. Verse 41, and they've made an image of a calf in those days and offered sacrifice to the god and rejoiced in the works of their own hands. Pastor says, remember that word calf. We've got to cover it later in detail to show you what this represents. It represents actually the four horns of the golden altar. Verse 42, then Yahweh turned and gave them up to worship the host of heaven, the universe, universal. That's what Catholic means. They're worshiping the host of heaven. The host of heaven is the gods that Yahweh says he counsels and said, you should be doing this and that. Don't forget these scriptures. It's here a little, there a little. Can I have my next slide? Now, this image of the calf spoken of also in Acts chapter 7, it says they made an image of the calf in those days. You put in image of the calf, you get 666. And it says they made an image of a calf. Let's look at these numbers. 117 means leader, masters, lordly, mightier one, from 142 meaning great. That next word, number 702, it means four. Four. Okay, the four horns from 7251, square, squared, or four square. Notice the Masonic Lodge here, the square room with the squares that are black and white there in front of that altar there with the four horns. You see that? Notice their logo is a compass and square. Now let's load those meanings in the next slide. Those meanings I just gave you. Go ahead. Next slide. You get 7794. Strong's Hebrew 7094 means ox, bull, ahead of a cattle for plowing, for food, for sacrifice, feeding. It says, see Psalm 106:20 in reference to golden calf, it says. From 7788, traveler, to travel, journey, go. And it's speaking about in Genesis 10 where it says where they journeyed from the east or from the beginning, this in Babylon there where they set up Babylon, these masons, these traveling men, these ones that have built this kingdom that's apart from Yahweh. Now, Psalm 106:20 says, by turning from you, Yahweh, whom they glorified, they committed a sin comparable to worshiping an ox that eats grass. That's what they became, beasts, beastly image. Remember this beast system. Let's go to the next slide, because in Romans chapter 1, the apostle Shaul puts it like this. He says, and exchange the glory of the uncorruptible Father for images made to resemble corruptible man and birds, four-footed beasts and creeping things. Let's look at the numbers here. 1318 is the first number. It means to trample, to tread. Remember, they're treading a path, a journey from the beginning. Strong's Greek, and their teaching also, that's part of their teaching. Strong's Greek 1318 means instructed, taught, from 1321 to teach, to preach. Remember, their deception comes through preaching. Okay, they've been preaching this deception from the beginning. It also goes to Revelation 13:18, that number 13:18, where it says, here is wisdom, let him who has understanding count the number of the beast, for it is the number of a man, and his number is 666. 7908 in the middle means loss of children, abort, cast calf, Bereave them of children. Bereave you of your children. Childless, depopulated, made childless, miscarried, unfruitful, rob of children, suffer abortion. Go look it up for yourself. Notice the sign down there at the peaceful scene about the abortions worldwide that Pastor told us about in Kane City. Can I have my next slide? Let's look at the third number, 5268. Notice he said they exchanged the image of Yahweh for corruptible man and birds. Birds? Strong's Hebrew 5268 is the word Nisroch. It's an Assyrian Babylonian god. You'll see it to the right. It has the head of an eagle. It's called the Great Eagle with a human body. In Wikipedia, it says the Temple of Nisroch, which is most likely a scribal error for Nimrod. Wow, what a coincidence. Notice the god Nisroch equals Nimrod 666. That gives it away. And then 5268 in the Greek means the beast of burden from 2218. Now you remember 2218 was when Cush begot Nimrod, wasn't it? Look in your book of Yahweh. And 2218 is New World Order in Gematria. New World Order. It means a beast of burden, a yoke, a heavy burden, troublesome laws, commands of the Pharisees, what unites or joins two people to move or work together as one, a pair of oxen pulling a single plow. Can I have my next slide? I got to go through these rapidly. Now, remember he said it's universal. They're worshiping the host of heaven. Well, who is? Let's find out. Notice, 2274 on both of them. 2274 is that association, the company, the Pharisees, Sadducees, Essenes, and Herodians. Remember the four horns. The company, meaning from 2266, to unite, be joined, to tie a magic knot or spell, to charm, compact, couple together, have fellowship with, make an alliance, league, and fascinate. Notice the second number, 1404, means lady, queen, mistress. And 1404 in Greek means a dragon, the dragon on the seven hills. And the third number means mark, and then in Greek it means pollution and contaminated by idols. Can I have my next slide? Put all those into Gematria, or put in Pastor's quote there from the 16th book of Israel, 41:41. It's 7196, and it means bands. From 7194 to bind, league together, conspire, conspirators, join together, to tie physically or mentally, knit, made stronger, make a conspiracy, work treason. And you'll see the Pharisees, Sadducees, Essenes, and Herodians, the 10 kings, and the quartet, the four horns on this golden altar. Now remember, 4 years ago, last week, an occurrence took place. Why don't you play the video and remind everybody what took place with that missile down there at the peaceful scene for people that didn't see it. It used to have something on top of it. Watch closely where the arrow is. Right when that car goes past. They just missed it. We'll play it again. Pay attention. Boink. 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 Sound effects provided by me. Now, didn't it make a beautiful plowshare afterwards? That's the way it fell. We didn't do that. Remember the city of the sun, Constantine, it's going to be cut off. There's the peaceful van across the street. Can I have my next slide? You remember the next day on 12/21, that was on 12/20 at 6 minutes after 6. And then the next day, Pastor got a receipt from Benny Keith for 761301, or 1 cent. You all remember that. Go back and watch that sermon from 12/26, the last sermon in 2016 or 15, just like this year, 4 years later. This is the last sermon in their Roman month. And it was 7613. You remember the number on the van license plate, the peaceful van, and the 1 cent was Pastor. Remember the 1 cent? And 7613 was from 5375 NASA. Can I have my next slide? I got to get through this. Okay, so here's Pastor. Last week, we all heard about this. Now, from when the House of Yahweh was established in 81, or the press room in Abilene was dedicated December or 12/21/81 to that day that sword fell down there at Cain City. It was 12,418 days. Let's take the first four numbers, 1241, and it means bull, cow, calves. Remember the four horns. Herd, ox, okay, as used for plowing. Heifer from 1239 to plow. Break forth, consider, care for, search, seek out. And that's what we're going to be doing. Remember, we're turning our swords into plowshares, and we're searching out. We're doing the right kind of plowing. They're doing the wrong kind. And notice, it was 1,462 days from this. This is the fourth anniversary last week from 12/20/15 when that sword fell to our anniversary last week, the 4 years. It was 1,462 days, and it means farmers, diggers, or plowmen, husbandmen to dig. Next slide. Now, they use two different spellings in Strong's for plow, P-L-O-W or P-L-O-U-G-H. The P-L-O-U-G-H is the British spelling of plow, but they use both. If you put in a plow or plow, you get 1074. But you also get 1506, which means something cut off. To cut, divide, cut down, cut off. Add up all those numbers that you have for the plow or plow, and you get 2759 from 2790, which means to cut in, engrave, plow, devise all together, and then it used plow again in a separate spelling. Look for yourself. Now, my last slide. On 12/21/19 at 7:05 p.m., Pastor got a call by somebody he'll tell you about, I guess, and they said it's getting ready to roll over to the millionth viewer. Now, this was on 12/21, so from 12/21/1981 to last Sabbath on 12/21/2019, it was 13,879 days, 1982 weeks. 1982 means flowing. From 1980 to flow. Come and let us go, grow. Look for yourself. Remember, the show's right here, 1.2 million views as of 12/21 of last week. The 1 millionth, 1074. Wow, what a coincidence. So 1 millionth. And get this, added bonus. If you type in 12/21/1981, and then you type in 12/21/2019, it's 5376, which again means NASA. Remember the rocket? And remember, NASA is where 7613 came from. Go look at the sermon from 7613, 7613, about Egypt. Egypt was called Egypt, something about Egypt. We could convert them in 30 days, something like that. But anyway, I've already gone over. My time's cut off. So if everybody would please stand. Remember, you're doing a great work here. Yahweh's putting his signature on every single thing in the house of Yahweh. So at this time, if you're already standing, I'm going to introduce the great Kohan Yehuda Hawkins.
Please be seated. I will say shalom. I'll say it again, shalom. I mean, there was a lot of noise going on. There's an old saying that dynamite comes in small packages, and that's about the size of the scripture that I worked on today, because it is really dynamite, as the world would say. I would, if you please, go in your holy scriptures and turn to 3rd Yochanan, verses 11 and 12. Now, it's only a page or two before the book of Revelation, whether you got a Bible or book of Yahweh, so it shouldn't be difficult to get to it. It's a very short verse, but we're only, book. but it only has, but we're going to look at verses 11 and 12. Everybody get locked on and we'll go. All right, I'm going to read it as it is written in the King James Version and the Douay Catholic Version. They're pretty well the same, historically anyway. Beloved, follow not that which is evil, but that which is good. Don't worry about that. We'll work on that. He that doeth good is of God, but he that doeth evil has not seen God. Demetrius hath good report of all men, and of the truth itself, yea, and we also bear record, and ye know that our record is true. Good, 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 good. They even say it in German, Gute, and so forth. The word God that is written in twice in 3rd Yochanan, or 3rd John, if you have a Bible, is 3rd John, right before Revelation, a couple of pages. But the word God that is written in 3rd Yochanan, verse 10, in the King James and Douay versions, is translated from the Canaanite word Elohim. This word is listed on pages 29 and 31 of a complete Hebrew and English critical and pronouncing dictionary by William L. Roy, which shows this word is a borrowed form of the Hebrew word Ayil, and thus this word means Yahweh, the eternal Father, the self-existent, unoriginated, and independent and eternal Yahweh who has produced all things. Hence, he who is, who was, and who will be, as is written in Revelation 1, verse 8. Now, this is a Hebrew dictionary, and they're talking about Revelation. But the New Testament was only written in Greek. Well, this guy doesn't say that. He quoted Revelation 1:8 in his Hebrew dictionary. The word good that is written twice in 3rd Yochanan, verse 10, in the King James Version and Douay Version, is translated from the Hebrew word tub. That's tet, wa, bet, if you'd like to have the letters. Gesenius Hebrew Lexicon by Edward Robinson, pages 361 and page 361 through 363 and 396 and 397 shows this word means to do right, to act right. Or in other words, you do what's right. What is it? Righteousness. So remember that, please. The word seen that is written in 3rd Yochanan, verse 10 is translated from the Hebrew word ra, resh aleph hey. This one is listed on pages 950 through 952 of Gesenius Hebrew and Celtic Lexicon by Edward Robinson, which shows this word means to perceive, to cause to learn, or in what we call knowledge, or to know. The words good report that are written in 3rd Yochanan, verse 11, are translated from the Hebrew word od. That's ayin dalit, od. This word is listed on page 1014 of a Hebrew and Celtic lexicon to the Old Testament by Julius First. It means a witness, a piece of testimony. Now, in this case, it's talking about people. It's plural. And it means more than two. But that is not intended to say that the two witnesses have been changed. It's just that there are going to be people working with them that are going to go with them to bear witness, or the apostles even. So this is what 3rd Yochanan verses 10 through 11 is saying. Beloved, do not follow that which is evil, but that which is righteous. He that does righteousness is of Father Yahweh. But he that does evil does not know Father Yahweh. They claim him. Yochanan, this is the same Yochanan that said, if you don't walk in the ways of Yahweh and say you know him, you're lying through your teeth. All right. He that does evil does not know Father Yahweh. And he doesn't know you either. That's what Yeshua said. I never knew you. But look at verse 12. All testify that Demetrius, there was a man that worked with Saul, is a faithful witness, or Yochanan too. I'm talking about both of them probably. All testify that Demetrius is a faithful witness, and of the truth itself. Yes, and we also bear record, and you know that our record is true. You have the right to say that too. 1 Timothy 3:15 says, the house of Yahweh is the pillar and ground of the truth. But that's the type of dynamite these little short scriptures say. And the world just doesn't get it. But you do. For this is the pillar and ground of the truth. And if you walk in Yahweh's ways, you shall learn that truth, and it will set you free. May Yahweh bless your understanding. Please stand. And I turn the services over to the great Kohan, Ilya Hawkins.
Shabbat Shalom, everyone. Please be seated. The peace of Yahweh be with each and every one of you. Now, moving along in the news, one thing to get into the news is to see how this stage is being set for war. And, of course, it's all based around oil. Remember, don't forget, always remind yourself of Revelation 6:6, with hurt not the oil and the wine. And you're going to see a manipulation, a transition of transaction taking place in our world today. And it starts out with China and India, who have very patiently been waiting and forming a new way to where they're hoping by next year they can control the price of oil. Remember, oil is sold on futures. It's not sold like we go to the gas station and we buy oil, we buy crude or gasoline. It's sold on futures, and it's not just sold on demand, but also on expectation of growth. And the two countries that have shown more expectation of growth is China and India. They are also trying to encourage other countries, mainly Japan and South Korea, to also join into this. Now, keep in mind, this is Iranian oil and Russian oil, and also China. Remember, they've just recently tapped into oil. This is their oil that's taking this market, and they're using to consume this. So a lot of financial gain involved in this. Also, one thing that's missing is nothing concerning the petrodollar will be involved. In other words, this will all be buying and selling outside of the petrodollar, which means they won't be able to sanction you directly. They'll have to start sanctioning countries you deal with, businesses you deal with. And that's what we see moving along to Germany. You have the Norm pipeline, the gas pipeline that's being run through the Baltic Sea from Russia into Germany. Germany is looking to buy natural gas from Russia. Well, United States has come out this last week, and it kind of shocked even countries that are used to dealing with the United States. It wasn't this last week as much as it's been taking place over a period of time, but this last week, the United States issued cease and desist letters to all companies that are part of this gas pipeline. That's usually what you give someone who's doing something illegal. You warn them that they better stop or you're going to face a lawsuit. Well, the United States has given companies that are working with this gas pipeline 30 days to stop what they're doing in the building of this gas pipeline so that it cannot take place. Well, Germany and Russia have both said they're going to push through, and this pipeline is going to take place. Once again, it will be bypassing the petrodollar. Now, while all these things are taking place, you're also going to see at the end of the year, they talk about the wealth of the economies, and you've always heard Pastor talking about how these economies, they work you to help drum up tax dollars to put forth in the a governmental system, and that would be fine if they would use it to support the people. But it's used to support a war machine, and they show how the top 26 people, the richest people in the world, the top 26, have equal amount of wealth to everybody else in the world. So from 27 on down to the poorest person, the top 26 can balance the wealth off in that. So that's a lot of wealth all kind of congregated around one center group of people. Well, you also at this time, you have China, Iran, and Russia. We've talked about this in the news. They're holding war games in the Sea of Oman and also the Indian Ocean. Well, these war games, you can call them practice drills. And as you see, the news reporter who's talking about Iran, he talks about how smart Iran is. If you have the largest war machine coming against you, they're sanctioning you, they're wearing you down, who do you go find as friends? Well, you go get the second and the third largest military in the world, and you make friends with them. Because together, you can help combat the largest military group in the world. And that's what we see. And as you watch this news, you're going to see The stage is being set that Pastor has been talking about. Everybody is now talking about the stage is being set for World War III, or a great war, as they're saying. And they also say World War III. They're mentioning it many different ways. But this shows also Russia with a spy ship off the east coast of the United States. Russia knows the United States knows about it, and they're fine with it. That as long as the United States knows it's there, they're fine with it. Turkey being sanctioned once again by the United States for doing business with Russia on these S-40 missiles. And Turkey is telling the United States, if you sanction us, we're going to shut down both Air Force bases that we've allowed the United States to use. And remember, there's 50 nuclear weapons over there on the Air Force bases they've been allowed to use. And then NATO coming out, they're talking about NATO, and why does NATO even exist? Of course, NATO was supposed to be put together to combat the Soviet Union, but now they're saying that NATO is searching for an enemy. They need somebody to say, we need to attack somebody, but we know that NATO is the army of the Pope. It's there to represent the Catholic Church. We know the cause, but watch the reporters. They're trying to figure out, well, why does NATO still exist? But the one conclusion they do come up with, NATO takes a lot of tax dollars to build an enormous war machine, and they have an agenda. They're just not too sure what the agenda is. If they would listen to Yisrayl Hawkins, they would know exactly what the agenda is. And then you get into multipolarity governments. Now, multipolarity, it's important to understand what the meaning of this is to understand what they're talking about. Multipolarity, it means a distribution of power between 3 or more countries, allies, or parties. That doesn't work in this governmental system. Remember, let us be like the first beast. That's the Catholic Church, along leading the United States with this ruling authority. No other authority is allowed. And they're showing how Russia, China, even Iran, they're all trying to get out of this governmental control that's being put upon them, this pressure through sanctions. You do what we say, or we'll sanction you. And Germany is one example. They're just trying to do a business deal with Russia, and they're being sanctioned for buying gas from Russia without the permission of the United States. And to show how much the United States is willing to go, this headline right here, U.S. willing to shoot Syrian officials to protect the oil. Now, it says Pentagon officials asserted fifth day, the U.S. military authority over Syria oil fields. So this is Syrian oil. The United States is saying this, that the Syrian oil fields, because the United States forces are acting under the goal of protecting Americans from the terrorist activity and would be within their rights to shoot a representative of the Syrian government who attempted to retake control over the country's natural resources. So this is the United States saying we have a right to shoot the Syrian governmental officials if they come and try to take their oil back that we stole. Now, if you think that they're not serious about killing people, it's out there in the open. There's nothing being hidden about this. But watch what they're saying with this multipolarity system and this unipolarity system, which is one ruling government. They're showing that the stage is set for war. The tensions are building. You can see a pot on the stove. It's boiling. There's no other way that they're going to see to settle this matter other than they're going to go to war to see who's going to come out on top. And that's what Pastor has been bringing since he wrote The Mark of the Beast, how this is building up with Russia and China and the United States and the Vatican sitting in the background and all of them wanting to come out on top. At this time, if we could please go ahead and play the news.
And China is apparently breaking records for crude oil imports, and India not far behind. In fact, it's estimated both countries will dictate the price of crude oil in the coming year. But what can this mean for the global economy? And is OPEC losing its power to determine price and demand? RT correspondent Isayah Tavenger is joining us in studio for more on this developing story. Isayah?
Manila, in today's oil market, anything is really possible. And thanks to India and China, the old power struggle of world oil markets could now be on the verge of a significant shift. And here is why. China and India, the world's top and third largest oil importers, are currently nearing an arrangement to form a buyer's bloc that could dramatically tilt bargaining power in favor of oil importers. Basically, what the buyer's bloc would do is to bargain collectively security for oil supplies and reduce the influence of the Saudi Arabia-led cartel on oil prices. Currently, Asian countries are heavily dependent on OPEC countries for their oil requirements. In fact, China imports over 70% of oil needs, and India imports even more at 80%. And together, they account for almost a fifth of global oil consumption. So historically, this dependency has always tilted the scales heavily in favor of producers who force buyers to pay a premium. Now, on the other hand, the U.S. and EU countries do not have to shell out this extra premium money when buying OPEC's oil. India has even lobbied long and hard against this charge, but with zero results. So this new joint oil partnership plan will help in cutting better deals with oil producers, making this undesirable premium a thing of the past. There's also efforts to make Japan and South Korea the world's fourth and fifth biggest oil importers to join the bloc. Now, if that happens, it could turn the entire global oil market on its head, leaving India and China dictating oil prices. So over time, this joint sourcing plan could significantly erode OPEC's sway on all things oil. But there's also another factor here, Manila. China and India have been consistently undermining the U.S. in importance when it comes to oil price trends in recent years. So while China's oil consumption averages about 13.5 million barrels per day, India at 5 million barrels per day, and the U.S. still the largest oil consumer guzzling at around 20 million barrels per day. The growth is actually a lot faster in India and China. Now, for example, in China, oil demand has been growing at an average annual rate of 5.5%. And in India, it's been growing by some 5.5%. Meanwhile, the U.S. oil demand has been only climbing by about 0.5% over the last decade. So what's more interesting is that no one seems to be paying attention to U.S. oil imports, even though the U.S. imports almost 8 million barrels per day. And that's because oil import numbers are not a measure for oil prices, but demand growth trend is what really sets oil prices, which is why China and India are the countries to watch for those who want to know where oil prices are going at any particular point in time.
Tonight, there appears to be another foreign policy decision by our American leaders, which will do just the opposite of what it's intended to do. It's like it keeps happening, right? I mean, this is a kind of a familiar theme at this point. We sanction China, and what does China do? A natural gas deal with Russia. So it can be argued that we kind of help create that Russia-China alliance. One of the stories that we talked about last week, remember? We sanction Iran, and what does Iran do? They reach out to China, and they do an oil deal where they will sell China tons of oil at what is essentially kind of a discounted price, right? And now here's the latest. Tonight, the U.S. Senate is announcing sanctions against any company that assists Russia in building the Nord Stream 2 pipeline that will provide Germany with Russian natural gas. How is Russia providing gas to Germany essentially an economic exchange between two sovereign countries, a threat to me or to you or to my family or to your family? How? Most of us understand national security concerns or humanitarian concerns, right? And from time to time, those security concerns, those concerns about humanitarian issues like South Africa, for example, they may necessitate sanctions, right? But the idea that the United States of America would sanction a business deal, which is essentially pretty much what we're talking about, sanction a business deal, which is what this seems to be, is inexplicable, which is why it's something that we ought to question. These sanctions, which passed the House last week, the Senate today, and will likely be signed by President Trump by the end of this week. His administration will then have 60 days to identify any company or any person who assists in the building of that pipeline. That company or person would then have their U.S. visas revoked and their property rights blocked unless they agree to cease all work and or business relations with anything having to do with said pipeline. Oh, by the way, and they have 30 days to stop, 30 days to do so. This is fascinating, especially when you think of just in the terms that we're talking about. It's a business deal.
Like you said, it's a business deal. This is a bilateral deal between Germany and Russia, and now it seems like the U.S. presumes to dictate who these European countries can do business with.
In 2010, the 10 richest people in the world had a reported total wealth of $296 billion compared to $822 billion today. Oxfam, the International Human Rights Organization, reported this year that the 26 wealthiest people in the world own the same wealth as the poorest half of the entire world. So my question to you, did you get richer in the past 10 years? Are you better off today than you were 10 years ago? We start with the U.S. imposed sanctions, drawing ire all over the world. And how long will countries wait before they respond? Well, it looks like a pretty loud response will be coming tomorrow when China, Iran, and Russia begin 3 days of Navy exercises in the Indian Ocean and, as I mentioned, in the Gulf of Oman. And it looks like the country's finest aquatic firepower, naval firepower, will be on display, as China has confirmed that it will be sending a guided missile destroyer to accompany the drill.
This isn't just a military exercise. It's a political statement. The Strait of Hormuz is the world's most important oil artery. A fifth of our daily oil flows through it. 21% of global supply every day. It's a crazy amount. And as with oil, the strait is highly flammable.
We begin with this dramatic escalation in the tension between Iran and the West.
Serious provocation tonight in the Strait of Hormuz after Iran seized a British tanker.
Iran seizing control of a British oil tanker. UK is accusing Iranian boats of trying to intercept a British oil tanker.
There seemed to be no end to this escalation. Washington and everyone with a warship or regiment to spare seemed to be rushing into the Persian Gulf. I mean, wasn't the nicest neighborhood to begin with, what with Saudi Arabia and Iran, mortal enemies facing off across the tiniest of channels. And when it seemed like things couldn't get worse, they did.
The attack was launched from the north and was unquestionably sponsored by Iran. Amid all the calls for de-escalation, Iran has now launched an unprecedented attack on the world's energy supply.
Having failed at max pressure, Secretary Pompeo's turning to max deceit, blaming Iran won't end disaster.
Right at the edge of the precipice, cooler heads prevailed. Things calmed down somewhat. Everyone's finger's still on the trigger, but it's more a diplomatic battle now. For example, Trump's still pressing on with his sanctions, trying to force Iran to abide by a nuclear deal that Trump himself pulled out of. Big protests in Iran as well, helped along by Washington. The exercise is officially unrelated to this crisis. It's an anti-pirate and anti-terror drill. It's also a very clever move by Iran. Pressured and threatened as it is by America, Tehran decided to call over some friends, apparently for a friendly sail together. China and Russia, the second and third most powerful militaries in the world. As I said, pretty clever.
Officials are warning of a maritime hazard off the southeastern U.S. coast, a Russian spy ship. CNN's Brian Todd is here with details. Brian, this Russian vessel, what, it poses a threat?
It does, Wolf. You know, normally this ship, the Victor Leonov, menaces America's east coast with its spying operations. Tonight, it's not only doing that, but U.S. officials say it's putting other vessels in danger as well.
The Leonov has been prowling around America's east coast for more than 4 years, near some key U.S. Navy installations.
Analysts say that despite the recklessness, the accidents, all the setbacks, we should not expect any of this to deter Vladimir Putin from pursuing his grand strategy, not only of projecting Russian military power across the globe, but also of signaling his American and NATO adversaries not to mess around with his turf, those naval bases in the Baltic and Black Seas, in the Pacific and Arctic Oceans that the Russians value so much.
And tensions are again escalating between the United States and Turkey. This as Ankara threatens to revoke access to a vital U.S. airbase if Washington follows through with threats of sanctions. RT's Rachel Blevins is joining us live from the newsroom with the latest details to this. Rachel?
Well, Manila, Turkey is now firing back after U.S. senators showed support for legislation that would hit Washington's NATO ally with sanctions over its recent military offensive in Syria and its purchase of Russia's S-400 defense system. In an interview, Turkish President Erdogan threatened to cut off Washington's access to one of Turkey's most vital air bases, saying it would be justified if the U.S. moves forward with sanctions.
If it needs to be closed, we'll close Incirlik. If it needs to be closed, we'll close Kurichik. The whole issue is, in the event measures like sanctions against us are carried out, we will respond in the necessary way within the framework of reciprocity.
The airbase Erdogan is referring to has been used recently by the U.S. for the wars in Afghanistan, Iraq, and Syria, and it currently hosts around 5,000 American troops and 50 of Washington's nuclear bombs. And 50 of Washington's nuclear bombs. And 50 of Washington's nuclear bombs. In response to the warning that Turkey could cut off access to the U.S., Defense Secretary Mark Esper questioned whether the NATO member would be acting in the best interest of the alliance. Now, Turkey's warning comes in response to legislation in the U.S. that could hit Ankara with a new round of sanctions. Last week, the Senate Foreign Relations Committee voted 18-4 to support a bill that includes measures condemning their NATO ally. And even though negotiations with Russia led to Turkey's decisions to pull back its military offensive in Syria, the ties between Ankara and Moscow have also received complaints from the U.S. after Turkey followed through on plans to purchase the Russian S-400 defense system earlier this year. Now, Manila, despite repeated threats from U.S. officials that Turkey should not buy and now should not use the S-400, Turkey has yet to fully comply with Washington's wishes.
Russia says NATO is ready for a major conflict, this after seeing an increase in military drills. Now, the country's top general made the statement in a year-end briefing to Russian military members across the world. The general pointed to increased war games at the Baltics and in Poland. Meanwhile, a new article in Foreign Policy says the State Department is looking to get back out of Iraq. They claim a new letter to the Senate Foreign Relations Committee says it is looking to reduce staff, particularly in northern Iraq, as anti-government protests continue in the country. Bipartisan critics of the plan say it would leave a space for even more influence from neighboring Iran. We're going to start off with this idea in the assessment that NATO is drilling for a large-scale war. Do you agree with that assessment, especially considering all the turmoil that is going on within NATO itself?
Well, I think it's true that NATO is drilling for large-scale war, but NATO doesn't want large-scale war, of course, because that would be a disaster. What NATO wants is to create maximum tension, maximum pressure, because that's the only way they can justify their continued existence. You know, NATO should have gone out of business when the Warsaw Pact went out of business. NATO doesn't have an enemy. We know this from the meeting they just had in London. They couldn't figure out who the enemy is. So they don't have an enemy. They don't have a purpose. Secretary General Jens Stoltenberg said of these big, massive exercises last month near the Russian border, the purpose is to prevent, not to provoke. To prevent what? What is he talking about? The Russian tanks are going to steam on into Poland? I mean, is this 1945 or something? It's just absurd when you look at it. So, no, all they want to do is they want to keep the money flowing. They want to keep the jobs program going. They want to keep the tension high because the whole thing is a total farce.
In that same case, if they were to go to war, the main goal in this, I always look at it going, it ultimately comes to power and to money. The question is, which one is more dominant under influence right now with these countries, and who would they actually be fighting against? Do they really think the world is ready to go to war with a power like Russia or China? Who would be the enemy that they could actually all agree on is their common enemy?
Well, Scotty, I'll tell you who the real enemy is. That's the American people when it comes to NATO. There's a war on our pocketbooks. There's a war to rip us off, to prop up, first of all, to defend wealthy European countries, which don't need defended. And in fact, we know that the Europeans don't feel threatened by Russia because they refuse to spend any money on their defense. And Trump has to practically take them in a headlock to get them to cough up a couple extra bucks. Do you think if they really were afraid of the Russians coming over in their tanks, they'd spend a couple more bucks fixing up their military. No, it's a total farce. The whole thing is a farce. Billions of dollars are taken from American working class and middle class people and sent overseas to prop up well-connected elites overseas. So yeah, the whole thing, it really is a scam.
The Washington consensus, led by the United States, says the liberal world order must be defended at almost all costs. Said differently, the foreign policy blob demands the post-Cold War unipolar moment be preserved. But alas, it would seem a multipolar world has already arrived. The reason why I want to do this program at the end of the year is because we tend to look at events in a micro fashion, you know, what's going on in this country, that country, Trump administration, Brexit, you know, which of course we do in the news media. But I sometimes think that we miss the very big pictures of what's going on and the major changes that are happening around the globe and the international system. And this whole idea of a multipolar world, which is kind of foreboding to talk about in Western media because by default, it means the West loses something and somebody else gains something. Is that one of the reasons they don't like to talk about the coming of a multipolar world? Go ahead, James.
I think it is, Peter. I mean, look, you're right. I think a multipolar world is a de facto reality now. Unfortunately, that is the last thing that the establishment in Washington wants to admit, that they are committed still to this unipolar notion that emerged with the end of the first Cold War in the early 1990s, the idea that the United States is the unipower, the only really legitimate great power, and the other ones have no alternative but to accommodate themselves to the wishes and diktats from Washington. And even when that policy has visibly failed, for example, in Ukraine or in Syria or in other places, that they are committed to, you know, for example, Nord Stream 2, we're still trying to sabotage that, even though it's quite clear to me that that attempt has failed, that they cannot let go of this notion that other powers do not have to ask a mother may I every time they want to do something that is in their national interest. And this is something that the people in charge of the establishment in Washington just cannot admit to themselves.
We saw the white paper that was leaked to the New York Times shortly after the collapse of the Soviet Union. Paul Wolfowitz was its real author. But that was, in fact, the de facto sort of new doctrine for world dominance presented by the United States after the collapse of the Soviet Union. What that white paper made clear was that the U.S. wasn't going to have a peace dividend, that because the Cold War was over, because the Warsaw Pact had disintegrated, that then NATO could be disarmed and the U.S. could use all of the money spent on militarism and war to help human beings, like pay for health care or affordable housing. Indeed, what the white paper established was that the U.S. must now seek to carry out unipolar dominance over all other potential rivals in the world. And the letter says very clearly, we will allow no potential rival to challenge U.S. dominance. We will allow no potential rival to challenge U.S. dominance. And that's been the operational principle for the last 27 years. But in fact, it's come apart. It's come apart because the U.S. got bogged down in the wars in the Middle East while China came up. It got bogged down in the wars in the Middle East while Russia got back on its feet. And so these two other major centers of power, China and Russia, big enough economies and strong enough militaries and large enough population-wise, those two countries have come up. Now, both Russia and China said, look, let's make this win-win. Our growth, our development doesn't have to be at your expense. At your expense. But the American government doesn't see it that way.
This idea that somehow our dominance was itself the goal, not even necessarily what that gets us as a country. How does this make our people safer or more prosperous? And you compare it to the alternatives in history. For example, if you look at the long peace from 1815 to 1914, where Britain was the leading power, but it also understood that the other powers, France, Germany, Russia, had legitimate aspirations on the world stage, and there was a balance among the powers. We're not willing to accommodate that. Even though we're here in the Western Hemisphere, we're by nature the most secure of the great powers, we could accommodate the Russians and the Chinese, understanding that they have legitimate interests, a legitimate sphere of influence. We would still be the leading power in much the way that Britain was during the 19th century. But that's not good enough. We have to have absolute dominance. We have to deny legitimacy to those other powers. We have to have absolute dominance. We have to deny legitimacy to those other powers.
I mean, this is willfully creating instability in the international system. It's willfully being done because this is what kept the peace. And that's what these agreements were, people invested in, major powers invested in them to make them work. Now we have this, the opposite. We don't even want to talk about arms control. I mean, this is truly dangerous for the world system. Go ahead, Brian.
Indeed. You had the Nuclear Test Ban Treaty of 1963 that prohibited the atmospheric testing of nuclear weapons. That was something that was very good. We had the 1967 Outer Space Treaty. We had the SALT Treaty, then the START Treaty, START 1. We had the Ballistic Missile Treaty, the Anti-Ballistic Missile Treaty. All of those treaties, all of them are gone with the exception of the START Treaty,
which
expires in 2021. Yeah, that's going to expire, and there's no negotiations right now as of yet underway. There's starting to be some talk about negotiations. But Bush got rid of the Anti-Ballistic Missile Treaty. That was in 2002, 2003. Putin says that was the beginning of the modern era of the breakup of the Cold War architecture for arms treaties. Now, Trump just got rid of the INF, the Intermediate Nuclear Range Treaty.
And open
what the
skies.
U.S. is clearly
and open
doing
skies.
by script.
Open skies as well.
Open skies. And NATO 2 weeks ago declared that outer space is their new war-fighting domain. In contrast to the Outer Space Treaty, where the major powers said, no, we're not going to fight wars in outer space. Now that's a war-fighting domain. So the reason for it, and you're talking about big picture, Peter, the real reason is the U.S. now believes that it can actually gain military supremacy and thus dominance in these different war-fighting domains, military supremacy and thus dominance in these different war-fighting domains. And that's what the U.S. had basically been forced to abandon during the Cold War, once the Soviet Union achieved a basic parity with the United States. That idea of mutually assured destruction, that's gone now. Now it's full spectrum dominance and military supremacy as the operational doctrine of the Pentagon. This sets the stage for global war. 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 And the military doctrine of the Pentagon, recently revamped, says we're getting ready for global war with Russia and China. This is a society that's saturated with militarism because it is good business, and the politicians know that, and they don't defy it. And that's this intertangling ideology and the business of war mixing so that the United States reinforces the notion that it must use military power above all else to ensure that it's a unipolar world where they have full spectrum global dominance. That's a recipe for disaster.
At this time, if everyone would please stand, I would like to introduce the greatest teacher in the world, the great guy in Yisrayl, Abel Hawkins. Praise Yahweh! Oh, look at this, look at this. Look at this. Oh, this is beautiful. Praise Yahweh. They're all yours, Yahweh. Yahweh. Be seated, everyone. The peace of Yahweh be with each and every one of you. I've got a couple of things here I need to cover. Turn over to Revelation 6. Now, I've made up my mind to get to this more. Not today because I got too much to cover, but in Revelation 6, verse 6, 6, and 96. That makes a 666 anyway. But 6, you'll see there, do not hurt the oil. And of course, this shows us this is what brings the wars then. If you read on that in chapter 9 of Revelations, which I'll explain again the next time I speak, or maybe write a newsletter on it. But China and India maneuver could soon leave world's oil powers toothless. They're taking away, going to try to take away the power that's already been established by the Vatican, and the United States is holding that power. That's yada. Now, another one, Iran turns to China and India in the face of U.S. sanctions, so that makes 3 countries, 2 countries dictating oil prices in 2020. In 2020, I know you remember all we brought out about the 2020, but we need to bring that out too in the gematria the next time I speak, and to get it fresh in everybody's mind what is actually going to take place. Hurt not the oil. That's what brings it. That's what brings on the great fighting that kills 1/3 of the people over that 4th part of the earth in and around the great river Euphrates. I was told that there was one thing that I needed to cover on the gematria and the work that's being done rather secretively, but they're watching closely. We have dedicated people, fully dedicated to the work, and this one woman called in at 7:05 to call the office and said, "Get ready, we're fixing to have the rollover." And of course, there's talking about the 1/1,000th, which that was brought out today, 1/1,000th, and how it's dates to the fastened to the house of Yahweh. Now it did roll over at 7:05 p.m. So if you got that, 7:05 p.m. 7:05 in 7:05 in Strong's means 4. 4. Now this, if you remember the 6 here, the oil, and the 4, the quartet. The quartet, but what goes with this quartet is this 4 horns of the golden altar. The 4 horns. Now the system that comes up to this quartet, the system that started in Genesis with the tree of evil. You had 2 trees, remember? And one of them was the house of Yahweh, Abel, the priest. The other one was the Catholic Church, who are God worshipers. You had a house of Yahweh, and you had the house of the God worshipers, which was the Catholics. That's what they mean, universal. I don't know if you saw this, try to remember, but I got to get this in. This Jeopardy show. I try to watch the news at a certain time, world news, and sometimes I get it on a little bit early, and they got the Jeopardy show on. On Jeopardy, they said, which planet or planets does the Catholic Church desire the most? Well, Jupiter was number 1. Mars and Saturn, I believe, were the other 2. Now, that was on Jeopardy show. They're always showing a lot of stuff, you can tell they're owned by the Catholics, and they get this in when they can. But they, too, know the connections that we know now about Jupiter, and they're bringing it out here and there, see, putting it in your minds. Okay, the 7:05 in Strong's means 4, which stands for the quartet, of course. 705 comes from 702, meaning 4. 705 comes from 702, and it means 4. Quartet, and also the 4 horns of the altar that we're chopping off. Bit by piece. We're getting our axe higher and higher to chop it off. That was covered quite a bit, but not this. That was the 4th anniversary, came on the 1/millionth that this traced back to, came on the anniversary of that sword being chopped off with a missile and falling and sticking in the earth. And they had the cameras that we have up showing the front gate, the entryway to the south office, mail room, and so forth, had this covered, and we got the picture. That's what you were seeing today. 4 is the quartet, or the 4 horns, and the 4th anniversary, all in one day. I think that is beautiful. Now if I can find what I want to work on. If I lose that, I can go with it anyway, but well, I don't have to. I don't have to trust my memory. This generation, it's the hardest there is. And you got to get this in your mind. Satan has more pull right now. Now we think of Adam and Eve, and and we think, all they did is take a bite of the same apple. And I guess I ought to get this set in your mind, but I want to bring more on it. But Adam and Eve, the way it was written in the scriptures, was it takes place, Eve had a certain sin. Then Adam partook of that same sin, and they rode off into the sunset. If you study the Hebrew words on this, you'll see that Eve partook of sin. Yes, she sinned, and then what took place next, we're guilty. All of us are guilty of this in one way or another, even the young people. And the young people have, there's a spirit of this. It's an inspiration from Satan that brings forth a desire, to put others down or to build yourself up higher than others. What really occurred here, and what is shown in the Hebrew words, is Eve sinned. Adam sinned not by taking of the whole sin, but in the way Adam handled the problem. I told some elders the other day, I said, I think this is where the word hell was invented. What the hell did you do that for? And this is how the man who was also the teacher, he was a teacher now. This man was a teacher, like the mother is the teacher, but like we are today, I handle problems with emotions sometimes that I shouldn't. And you should never let your emotions rule you. But you're not thinking about your emotions when someone dies, or when we got some big time troubles here and there in getting the work out. And Yahweh has put together a big team in the house, and of course that's part of it. What I was talking about a while ago, the woman that called me, she's a judge in the house, Judge Rebecca Matthews. And how did Yahweh know that? Who would know that besides Yahweh? It's in the gematria. How would they know it? Before that, there was someone called the office who works with bees and also gives news. Her husband works with bees and she gives news. And she called the office and said, before it ever took place, they said, we're going to have a rollover. Get ready. Well, they were all rejoicing and very anxious. If I could get the young people to rejoice with us in this, you know, how old you are, it don't make any difference. If you'd start rejoicing in what you're seeing coming, including the great rollover that's going to take place in this second big Passover, that where Yahweh is going to go forth, the saying about Yahweh, it'll never be said again after that Yahweh lives who brought 12 tribes out of Egypt. 12 tribes of God worshipers out of Egypt. But it's going to be said this time that Yahweh brought them out of sin. Now, praise Yahweh. And he's given Satan every opportunity. He's held nothing back from her, it says. So, you know, and in this time period, it's greater than ever before. If Adam had handled the situation correctly, he wouldn't have put himself into sin. He could have saw the weakness of his wife. He could have kindly helped her through this difficulty she is having and brought her in a righteous manner back to Yahweh. All of those things could take place. It's where the fights break out because of ruling with emotions. The fights, bitterness arises. It makes me think of this teacher I've told you about, that he would sit back in his chair. I'd almost like to put a cigar in his mouth. But he sat back in his chair and he's bragging on himself. No one makes 100 in my class. When I heard that, I thought, you know, is he running himself down? It sounds like it, but he thought he was bragging on himself. Now, he's the teacher, as Adam was the teacher. If he would have been a little bit brighter or had come through the school that our people are being put through, the Peaceful Solution Character Education Program that teaches you young people, not us, we already know it, but it teaches you young people, teaches the older people too, how to handle these problems. You got a perfect example. That's our Passover lamb, a perfect example. If you just read in Hebrews chapter 10, shows you he lived perfectly by the laws he's telling us to live by. Not these quack preachers now in the world saying, you know, he lived this perfect life for us. We can go ahead and sin. He doesn't say that. You know, you people know you're lying. You don't get that from the Holy Scripture. The Savior said, if you want to enter into life, keep Yahweh's laws. That's the only way. He said it again in Revelation. Blessed are those who keep Yahweh's laws, for they have right to the tree of life. The tree of life hasn't been here. It started, they killed him, they killed the preacher. Yeshua tells you what these trees are, you know, in chapter 7 of Matthew, or Matthew's, if you got a King James Version. Read chapter 7, and he'll show you the righteousness that the great David Yehuda covered today. They hate that word so much that they withdraw it and put the word good, knowing that the word good is God worship. It comes from the gods. It means gods. Good like the gods. Well, that good like the gods, as Isaiah said, is your righteousnesses are as filthy rags to Yahweh. You call yourself righteous while you're killing millions of babies. You call yourself righteous when you kick people out of their homes. You call people righteous when you put refugees, so many of them, the countries can't even swallow them up, and you're going to kill 1/3 of them in that fourth part of the earth around the great river Euphrates, fighting over oil. This earth would produce enough oil to last if it was plumb full. Our earth is not full yet at all. We still got plenty of land. But you're fighting over something that's needless. Needless. But you're killing, and going to kill 1/3 of those people over the oil in that fourth part of the earth. And then you tell me that you're going to go to heaven and be accepted into a righteous kingdom? And you expect the people to be that foolish and hear you? Well, the tide is turning. This least of all trees, Yahweh says, is going to be bigger than any and all of these 4,199 religions of God worshipers. There was 2 trees to start with. One, the tree of Yahweh. That's called the house of Yahweh. It was rejected, taken away, and Yahweh says, won't be until the last days now. Genesis 49 shows it first, and then the other prophecy, Micaiah and Isaiah 2 and Micaiah 4. But in the last days, I will establish my tree. Yeshua said, these trees are people. Their offerings, the fruit they offer is the people. That's what Yahweh lives in. Well, the children and adults, the devices. You've been told this before. We've said it before. Read articles. Don't be giving your children things that ruins their minds. They say even a few minutes of television. Praise Yahweh. That's what I say. Even a few minutes of television does damage to a child's mind. And a child has to really work to get it out of it. But not only that, they got all of these goofy things that they are advertising on television that makes you want to jump in the car and go. It's like Satan. Where have you been, Satan? Where have you and your gods been, Satan? Eob. Remember Eob? And Yahweh asked Satan, where have you been? Where have you and your gods been? Oh, just traveling to and fro. Oh, we had nothing better to do. Are you getting any smarter at that, Satan? Well, maybe. Well, see, this is the attitude. This was the attitude with Cain, with Eve, after Adam threw a fit. That's kind of like what Hebrew words describe as he went into. He was the teacher. He was the teacher. He's the one that had the blame. Eve was deceived. Adam wasn't deceived, but he let his emotions get carried away and he sinned. Now, sin, this should show you too, and I'll show you if I get around to it, that sin comes in many different ways, but when you break what Yeshua told you and you don't love and practice that love with your brothers and sisters and using restraint, restraining yourself from doing certain things, that's where you're being tested. The way you say it, the way you do it. Now, you could beat them on the head. You can lash out at them with your tongue. I don't know of any criticism that ever helped anyone. It certainly hadn't benefited me in any way that I know of. And I said, I've got to quit this. But I still do it when my emotions get stirred up, and I think the work of Yahweh is suffering, and I'm thinking that of Adam. Adam had a great work he had to do. Well, you could see the things that Yahweh laid upon him. He had a great work he had to take care of. But he had a wife to take care of too. And he says, oh, Yahweh, that wife you gave me. That wife you gave me, Yahweh, she's the one. Yahweh said, no, you're the one, you're the teacher. You're the teacher. So if anyone's to blame, it's you. Find you another way of teaching it. But make the person you're teaching love you. You can do it. You can't do it by giving them a Roku box. You know what a Roku box is? It sounds about as goofy as it sounds. It does about as goofy as it sounds. Roku. Yeah, you study this enough and you'll go Roku. Just 2 minutes or 3 minutes will harm your child's mind. And it'll take him. Oh, I was only letting him see nature movies. Moochie? Is that all? You know, like what? Oh, lions and tigers and so forth. And what were they doing? Oh, they was killing and eating and stuff like that, like the Christians do. Yeah. Did you know how many things that is recognized that go into your mind versus things that are not recognized go into your subconscious mind? Even 3 minutes, and the experts say you've damaged that child for life. Now, he's got to overcome your teaching that child. Our children right here. He's got to overcome your teaching and then go on and enter. And we can do it. We can do it, children. We can do it. Set your minds. No matter what you're called. You know what Yeshua was called? Did you ever figure that one out? While they beat on his head. It's a great example, Adam. While they beat him, slapped him, pulled the hair from his cheeks. Try that on yourself. And he loved them enough to die for them. Now, the Passover, it ties in to Yeshua. He's the lamb that was sacrificed for the sins. Everybody sins. And everybody can partake of that sacrifice if they repent. Acts 3:19, repent and be converted. But you can't partake of it unless you repent and be converted. Read Acts 3:19. No, don't just read it, study it. Study it. I'd also like for you to study this maze down here before Passover. You can't do it easily. There's so much learning in that maze already, and we want to expand it before Passover. In fact, some of the things you're hearing here today is going to go into that on banners, Yahweh willing, and we can get to it, get around to it. But the pulls that we have and the things that Satan has to pull with, it comes as distractions. Our schools teach God worship. Every school in America, every school throughout the world. We're getting a lot of people from the Muslim world as well as the Christian world that is seeing that they've been led with a bunch of lies all these years. There wasn't even a house of Yahweh. They're seeing that. There's plenty of God worshipers. There's plenty of houses of God, more than the cities, Yahweh said. More than the cities are your gods. And this is all over the world. But we're getting a bunch of Muslims. Now, the Muslims, they follow the unclean laws, the clean and unclean laws of what you eat. And they're about the only ones that do and say they do and do it. Well, they could be a step closer, but then that they still have a bunch of questions that only the house of Yahweh can answer. And they've been studying it. And they know that Christianity is a fake, or anyone could read what they teach and compare it with the scriptures and see that they're lying. It's like Santa coming down the chimney and Easter bunnies laying Easter eggs. It's all just a bunch of lies. But it keeps you in a la-la world to waste your time, to keep you from studying the Holy Scriptures. And the study of the Scriptures is what begets you, not just studying it, but you got to have the one sent to beget you. You got to have that. That's shown in the Scriptures. In fact, one of the apostles said, I beget you through the teaching. I beget you. So I am your father, he said. I beget you with the teaching of Yahweh's laws. And of course, Yahweh's laws is that spirit of righteousness set in you that converts the whole person. Well, now the schools are teaching everyone to sin. They're teaching Christmas, Halloween, Easter. They're teaching war. Got their recruiting officers. They're waiting on the student when he gets of age. The churches are teaching it. They practice all these things that are forbidden in the Holy Scriptures. They're not anywhere close to the Holy Scriptures. They have their own righteousnesses, as they call it, that Yahweh says is as filthy rags. We, the house of Yahweh, now must take this tree that's been established in these last days, called the house of Yahweh. We've got to take that and teach the people how to love. The mistake that Adam made, you can make real easily. The mistake that Eve did, and the apostles warned you of this in Book 2. They warned you of making these same mistakes. This tree is doing it. We're doing it. It's not a one-day thing, but we're sticking the laws of Yahweh in front of you, and we're putting Yeshua's words in front of you, which says, blessed are those who do this. Yes, blessed are those. Well, this is also a tree of testing. Tree of testing, 2 trees. Genesis 2 and verse 9. It shows you 2 trees. One of righteousness, just one. Well, that was Abel, as Yeshua testified of Abel. His fruit people were acceptable to Yahweh because he taught the laws of Yahweh. He practiced the laws of Yahweh. Then, number 2 tree, which was also in the midst of the garden, was the God worshippers. That one taught evil like the gods. Evil like the gods was displayed with Cain. He killed his own brother. If you hate your brother, which you can do in a fit of anger, and emotion, high emotions, you can let this get away from you in just a flash, and you've cut yourself off from Yahweh, like Abel was cut off, and Yahweh went hunting him. Remember? Cain was cut off, not Abel. Abel was killed. Cain killed him. But in Genesis 3, 1 through 5, you preachers, write this down now and study it. I'm about through. Genesis 3, 1 through 5. Satan comes behind Abel. That's Cain, the God worshiper, comes behind Abel, teaching the way of the gods, evil like the gods. Evil like the gods. Well, there's one house of Yahweh shown there, still shown today, but the house of Yahweh was taken away right there. Shows you in chapter 3 of Genesis. The tree of life, that was Abel. They murdered him. Yahweh says it won't be established again until the last days. The Savior called it the last generation. It was established in this last generation. All who came before us were the God worshippers. All who came before us was God worshippers. Houses of the gods. Yahweh sent the prophets to warn them. They killed the prophets, persecuted the prophets. Then he sent his son. He told you this. And his son says, I will establish my house. That's Matthew 18:16. I will establish my house, and the gates of hell will not prevail. How do they prevail? How did they prevail with Adam and Eve? It's the same thing. The only thing today is we got a bigger job to do than they. We need to set our minds in advance. Don't let your emotions rule you. Don't let your lust rule you. Don't let your lust pull you out into Satan's world. Our job is to come out, right? Come out from among them. Don't partake. Don't partake. I guess I need to write that on a sign, a billboard, a banner, or something. Don't partake. Come out from among them. Do not partake. It's everywhere. It's being taught everywhere. You're being coaxed, not only with riches. I could be making $50 an hour out there. This is riches, man. I can buy whatever I want to. Well, you got a few years to live. Yeah, I think you got less than that if you don't come out from them. Adam and Eve, if you study that, study the maze down here and be able to teach it to the people who come here for this next feast, because this next feast will set you up. It will set you up for the great feast where we'll actually enter the kingdom. Praise Yahweh. Russia, here's Christianity. Here's the religions today. Yes, they have their own Catholic church there. They worship their gods. same as they do in Rome. Russia deploys hypersonic weapon, potentially renewing arms race. Well, this hypersonic weapon will wipe out cities like New York. It's so fast that if they set one off, it takes 20 minutes, I think, to get from Russia to New York. By the time they saw it coming, it'd be too late to pull the trigger. But they would start pulling triggers from other places. And this will be the finishing touch, the burning, the 1 hour burning. Right now, we're looking at the destruction. If you'll read chapters 6 of Revelation and chapter 9, you will see that a third of the people is first going to be killed around the great river Euphrates and that fourth part of the earth. Where are the wars? I know you here know it, but I'm asking you preachers out there, or people that belong to these evil religions, as Yahweh calls it, evil religions. They're practicing God worship. They know it. They know that they're behind these wars. If they would start screaming from the pulpits, repent and be converted, the wars would stop. If the preachers that are leading them, the fact is the religions are leading these, hoping to kill off everyone that is not Catholic, everyone that is not Catholic. Well, folks, if you just knew, those people are worshiping the same gods you are. You're all brothers. But there's no way to love your brother when he has war on his mind. You can't get it out. If you'll all stand, I love all of you. Yahweh bless you. Praise Yahweh.
Y'all can be seated for just one quick announcement. Attention everyone who lives or owns property in Callahan County. We're having a very important local election coming up in 2 months. Sheriff Terry Joy is retiring and we will be electing a new sheriff for Callahan County. The Texas Republican primary election is on 3/3/2020. This election will determine the new sheriff. Please make sure that you are registered to vote so you can participate in this election and future elections to come. Each vote that we cast shows our local officials and our neighbors that we are part of this community and we are here to stay. Your vote helps to protect Yahweh's work and supports the city of Yisrayl. If you need a voter registration form, or have any questions, there will be a voter information table set up on the men's and women's sides of the sanctuary immediately after services. That's all the announcements I have, and I'll turn it over to Sunny Yisrayl for closing prayer.
Please raise your hands for prayer. Our Father in heaven, whose name alone is Yahweh, this is Deacon Obadiah, coming before you, and I'm head, Deacon Ramia. Somebody of God, so under your help us to show Messiah. We come before you this time, asking you to please help us to take to heart everything that we've learned and help us to understand. Pray that may you help us to walk as Yeshua walked. Bless us with an opportunity to serve on your Sabbath day and be a blessing to one another. We pray that you allow your saints who are being held back in prison at this time or in the different countries to be able to make it to your house along with the refugees. Help us to make right choices and practice the peace solution in our lives. As we have been taught today, I pray that may you help us to not let our emotions lead us. Help us to overcome those things that are holding us back so we can be ready for your soon coming kingdom, also for your soon coming feast. We pray that you bless everything we put our hands to do, guide and inspire us. Bless the food supply and keep it clean. We also pray that may you allow this work to keep on going and bless the workers with their needs. Pray all these things through Yeshua's name. Finish prayers of saying, I our Israel.